good evening. Might be kind of a light crowd tonight. I canceled for about 30 minutes there, but I was really in a rush to kind of get things settled in here, and I had a little bit of a conflict with my schedule earlier. There's a neat little clip from earlier this winter, since there's not much going on right now, and here's a little bit of stratocumulus from May, rolling in from the south, so that's tropical flow coming up from the Gulf, even during the cold season. So that's a big contributor to fog and low ceilings in Texas during the cold season. And here's cirrus coming in from the west. And you can see those contrails up there. And these are all ice crystal clouds. And usually with the middle clouds, like altocumulus, like you see right here, this is altostratus, a very dense layer. This tends to be a supercooled cloud, although I think what we're seeing here on this instance, this is like somewhere between altostratus and cirrostratus. This is like a 20,000 foot layer. So this is probably kind of like a mix of some supercooled clouds and ice crystal, and some pretty cool towers back there in the background. Okay, yeah, I think that's all we had for that. So we'll press on and look at the charts for tonight. I got kind of in a rush because those cloud pictures were coming up, but yeah, between 6:30 and 7, I wasn't really feeling too good, and I had a conflict with my schedule. Like I was saying earlier, I was going to take my son out swimming, but we decided to go ahead and just reschedule that. So we're just going to do kind of a short little program here. And let's see how things are looking in chat. Okay, there's Kevin McKinney and Ron Chalfont and Ryan Toomies, Eddie W., Robert Terrell, 76 degrees there where Brett Dean is. Windy there, dew point climbing. Kevin says audio is looking good. Ryan says very hot day in South Florida. Heat wave, 102 degrees. Lloyd McCarter, 88 degrees with light clouds and 72 degree dew point in Little Rock. Burl H says good evening. Wild Joker, 12,000, hello. And Ryan says repeat for Friday. Tomorrow morning, the local... Okay, I'm kind of confused. Okay, I'm sorry. All right, let me press on here, and let's take a look at things across the southern plains. We can see a southerly flow coming up from the Gulf there. So we are starting to bring the moisture up, and let's look at the dew point field. The higher dew points are going to be in yellow, and we see those right here. And that line indicates 72 degree and higher. So let me draw that isodrosotherm. I know this chart is kind of messy, but this is roughly the 72 degree line. And further south, we have the 76 line, and that's a very potent tropical air coming up from the Gulf there. And even offshore, we've got some 78s out there. So no wonder we had some convective complexes out over the Gulf the night before last. But we're also starting to firm up the dry line out in the central part of Texas. So maybe you could go something like that for the dry line, and this looks to be like a boundary, kind of like a little bit of a dry line. It's got maybe some characteristics of the sea breeze also. So you could see convection going up along that as disturbances from the west hit this richer moisture out around Victoria. And yeah, the dew points are looking very dry out there in New Mexico and West Texas. So this is a major change, and you remember a few days ago we had the moisture working its way to the west. It was feeding into that thermal low out over Arizona. The very intense heating was bringing that moisture westward. And so we've had the pattern kind of flip around here, and that's because the westerlies are really starting to pick up here. So we can see that on the 500 millibar chart right there. 30-40 knot flow coming in from the Rockies. And obviously that has a very big effect. So you can see the perpendicular component of the wind to the Rockies. Rocky mountain ranges are running something like that. So this allows for cyclogenesis along the lee slopes right there. So as a result, we've got pressure falls in the Texas Panhandle and right around the Trinidad area of Colorado. And pressures would be lower even further north if not for the fact there's some denser air moving into Kansas from Canada. And along with that denser air coming out of Canada, thunderstorms. So this is upslope activity, and you can see the flow running east to west there in Colorado. This is very common this time of year, and we see the moisture spreading westward, and that's a good setup for destabilization of the air mass and breaking any cap that is present. Okay, convective outlook for today. Pretty much focusing on the area just west and southwest of Wichita with a slight risk around that. So I think we're looking at some sort of convective complex developing in eastern Colorado and moving east-southeastward overnight. And we usually don't look at this until later in the broadcast, but I figured we can mix things up a little bit and check it out now. So this will tell us where to find the fronts. This indicates probably some sort of cold front through Colorado. And definitely we have a cold air mass present over northern Wyoming and Montana. So we only have to go across a very short distance from basically New Mexico up to Wyoming to find where the front is. And you can do a similar thing between Nevada and Oregon. Somewhere in between there, you're going to find the polar front. So that helps you narrow things down. And we've probably got a little bit of a warm front in northern Missouri. Got the Gulf wide open. And let's check out the other charts. Let's go to 700 millibars. With the increasing westerly flow, we should see advection of the elevated mixed layer out of the desert southwest. And we do see very warm temperatures out there. There's 18 there at Dodge City, and 17 at Midland, and 15 at DFW. So we are going to see the appearance of a cap on these soundings. And that's something we haven't had. Last week, the 700 millibar temperatures in Texas were running about 8 to 9 degrees Fahrenheit. And you can see now they're up to 15 to 16. So that's a huge change. And we'll check that out real quick and take a look at Fort Worth. Okay, so there's our good friend, loaded gun sounding. And there's the cap right there. So the cap is centered. The peak of the cap is between 750 and 800 millibars. So that's a level we can look at on some of the surrounding soundings. So we're basically looking at maybe about 7,000 to 8,000 feet up in the atmosphere. Down below that, there's the tropical air. You can see it's very rich. Surface dew points right around 70, and in the upper 60s all the way up to about 5,000 feet. So some pretty good depth on that tropical air. And then we lift this with afternoon conditions. And this is an evening sounding, so we're lifting from about 90 degrees. Let's do that real quick. Mix that bottom part of the layer, and you can see that we are pretty well capped here in Texas. And there's the convective inhibition. And then up above that, you see the positive area and that is our representation of Cape. And up at the very top of that, that's the equilibrium level, so we call that EL. That would be the top of the anvils. And you can see that that differs a little bit from the tropopause, which is up a little bit higher. Actually, I'm going to have to move this so you can see that better. Okay, so the equilibrium level was right around here. Tropopause was way up here. I'll put T for tropopause and E for equilibrium level. And then we have the overshooting tops. We have to dissipate all that CAPE, all that positive area. We dissipate that in this segment. So basically we take that area formed by the CAPE and then bring it up here, and that's going to represent the overshooting level. So that right there is the overshooting height, and that looks to be about 52,000 feet right there. And then you can see storm tops, if they developed, would be about 43,000 feet. So a lot of information you can get from these soundings. Let's check out Amarillo right now. Evening sounding from Amarillo. This is very typical behind the dry line. So I'm kind of showing you how to recognize all these different sectors around a surface weather system. So a little bit of moisture in the low levels, but very steep lapse rate back there behind the dry line. So what if we could get some of that good moisture coming back up into the caprock, like if we had maybe a shortwave rotating around the base of that trough in Arizona? What if we were to bring that very rich moisture back up the caprock? Okay, so we start with around 68 to 70 Fahrenheit. We want that to be about 3,000 to 5,000 feet deep. And we get something like, you have to lift that along the mixing ratio like that. So there's our lifted parcel. And you can see we've got enormous CAPE in there. That's probably about 3,000 or so. And the storm tops would be a lot higher also. And this sometimes does happen, and I think the Lubbock tornado of 1970 would be a good example of when the air mass back behind the dry line was able to recover due to southeasterly winds picking up, affecting that moisture back onto the caprock. Okay, we'll take a look at the polar orbiter data. Looks like we got ourselves a storm system moving on to the west coast there. Let me bring up the state borders. Okay, so California is right here. Looks like we've got some sort of Pacific system coming inland. I'm not sure I remember that on the thickness chart. Let me go back to that real quick. Okay, so checking the date here. Yeah, there is a Pacific system. It looks like maybe it's overriding this cold dome or this high pressure dome. I can see a little bit of troughing in here. In fact, there's a little bit of a cold pool right there. So it doesn't look like anything coming on shore as far as surface systems. We may see a different picture in the upper level charts. Okay, so looks like we got ridging there. Okay, hang on a second. I think something is a little bit screwy. Yeah, we're looking at old data. Good grief, no wonder. Thought I was losing it there for a second. Okay, there's today's data. So we don't have data off the coast very far because we don't have those swaths yet. Okay, now this looks more characteristic of the high pressure that we see offshore there. Okay, so nothing going on, ridging, and basically what we see here is the marine layer off the coast. Okay, inland looking pretty good. I think they've gotten rid of most of those fires. Going further north, though, it does appear we have thunderstorms in the mountains of the northern Rockies. So unstable conditions, and we know that that cold front is somewhere right in this region between Nevada and Idaho and between New Mexico and Wyoming. So back behind that front, there's going to be a little bit of instability back there, colder conditions aloft, and probably some residual moisture near the surface. Yeah, at the time that satellite made that pass, looked like a pretty good storm there near Lyman. And this is earlier during the day, before the storms formed, and we can see just towering, well, not even towering cumulus, just regular cumulus starting to form there around Lyman. And this is when the storm started to go up there around Lyman, and then about maybe 30 minutes to 45 minutes later, they were even larger and starting to move eastward. And that's pretty much what we have out in the West Kansas and Colorado area right now. So that's kind of like the very birth of thunderstorms that are going to form up into an MCS and move eastward overnight. Any sign of the dry line? Doesn't look like it. Let me check all the satellites here. Nope, no sign of the dry line, and that would be a problem if we were looking for development along the dry line this evening, because the boundaries are very important, and we have no way of seeing them without any visible clouds. So we would have to look at radar, do careful surface analysis. If we do have more moisture coming in, you can see that that helps quite a bit. We just look at textures and we can pretty easily find boundaries. So not a whole lot going on right now out in the moist sector, but up north, seeing if I can find that front. Yeah, there we go. There's a little boundary right there through the Wichita and Emporia area. So those are the kind of things you are going to watch out for when you're doing your surface analysis. Okay, there's what's going on right now. Satellite pictures showing an area of thunderstorms moving out of Colorado and into Kansas. And that boundary that we were looking at across central Kansas, storms have gone up along that. There's the infrared imagery, and I think Dora has pretty much moved out of the picture. I don't see it out in the Pacific anymore. Definitely some big thunderstorms down there, but the tropics are quiet right now. Things also pretty quiet in the U.S. itself. There are some thunderstorm areas in the central U.S. Florida really lighting up, though. You can see some big thunderstorms down there, and maybe we'll take a look at that. I'll bring up GR level 2. I got 21 people. Surprised. I figured it would be kind of a light night because for those of you joining, I had canceled things about an hour ago because I thought I was simply going to be unable to do the webcast tonight, but I managed to fit it in. But I will let you know that I'm planning to take one night off every week, and that may be like on a Sunday, so I'm not sure yet. I'll keep you posted as I figure that out, but I think probably by tomorrow night I should know what day that's going to be. I guess Tampa would be a good radar. We'll check that out. I was trying to decide between that and Jacksonville, but I think Tampa is closest to that action. So while that comes up, we'll just move over to the water vapor imagery, and you can see a lot of dry air across Texas. In fact, the driest air over the San Antonio, Austin area, around Del Rio. And then the deeper air, the deeper tropical air, that's out in Louisiana. And this is a consequence of the strengthening westerly component aloft. So it's starting to advect drier air eastward. And that's given us these springtime type soundings. So let me bring up Del Rio real quick, and you'll see all the dry air aloft. The satellite is sensitive mostly to the air from about 300 down to 700 millibars. And you can see definitely a lot of dry air in there. And another example would be Corpus Christi, and that's starting to get into some of the moist tropical air, but still a little bit of dry air aloft. And then Slidell, that's going to be within the tropical air, and you can see it's much more humid. So we're looking at this right there. That's the moisture. So not only is it humid, relative humidity is a measure of how close the lines are to each other, but the line is pretty far to the right. So the further that moisture is over to the right, the higher the dew point, the higher the mixing ratio, and the greater the amount of water vapor in the parcel of air. And through a large depth of this, if your moisture is way over to the right, that's going to give you high precipitable water. And that's a measure of how much moisture can be squeezed out in total from the atmosphere if you were able to rain all of that moisture out until nothing was left. So let's take a look at that. This is precipitable water. So let me roll that back to today. Set that on the current condition 0Z. And yeah, there's the picture right there. A little bit of precipitable water out in the central Texas area. That's kind of surprising. I guess that's due to the higher dew points close to the surface. So we're getting about 1 inch in that area. But the higher values of 1.5 to 2 inches, those are in Louisiana out to Florida. And there in central Florida, precipitable water amounts of 2 inches. But in the Four Corners area, much different. Precipitable water amounts of about 0.10 to 0.20 inches. So you can almost kind of trace where that dry line is. Here's the dew points. That's the current conditions right there. So the dry line roughly just through central Texas, kind of like that. I keep that on the moist side of the gradient. And then the 850 dry line, let's take a look at that. We're looking at the 850 millibar dew point. Never use relative humidity to find the dry line. That's a mistake there. Some people will look at upper air charts and try to figure it out that way. You need to use dew point or mixing ratio. And here, the dry line really stands out, running pretty much from Dodge City down to Childress and down to San Angelo. And out ahead of that, very good moisture depth. So this is showing that we've got dew points in the 60s all the way up to 5,000 feet where this level is. And so pretty good moisture access all up and down I-35 right in that area. And where that intersects the front there in central Kansas, that's a preferred area for convective development. So those storms we have out in Colorado right now, those are undoubtedly just going to continue working down that boundary and start tapping this better moisture supply. So a lot of good things going for that MCS. Okay, here's the storms in Florida. Not much to see. Kind of surprising because, you know, you look at that infrared imagery And you see how red this is, very cold tops. But that's probably just a consequence of the very high tropopause in that area. So by the time the parcels reach the top of the troposphere, they're extremely cold. Let me see if I can pull up a sounding for maybe Tampa. Yeah, so there's a Tampa sounding. Actually a pretty decent lapse right there, conditionally unstable all the way up, and up at the very top of the tropopause, or troposphere. Those temperatures are on the order of 40, 50, 60, around minus 70 Celsius, which is about minus 100 Fahrenheit, not minus 90 to 100 Fahrenheit. So it's hard to believe temperatures like Antarctica up there at 40,000 feet. And that can actually be a problem for airplanes because jet fuel starts to freeze around, I think, about minus 45 to minus 50 Celsius, which is pretty much anything to the left of that line right there. Now, fortunately, you know, the airplanes are not really flying up too high into the stratosphere, but and there is a certain amount of heat that's retained by the fuel. But depending on the weather pattern and where they're flying, especially over the poles, there can be very cold conditions aloft. And so sometimes they'll have to change flight levels to keep that fuel from freezing up. All right, let's see. We can take a look at the current conditions. Let me do that real quick. We'll bring up a surface map, since I do think we have an active dry line in Texas right now. Okay, so that may have affected the stream just a little bit, but data is processing. Now we're looking at Texas. And we can see those higher dew points coming up into central Texas right there. So 60-degree isodrosotherm, roughly like this. Nice 67 dew points in Altus. But we are just too capped to get thunderstorms out of this situation. However, up in Kansas, a different story. Front coming down south. There's the leading edge of that front. Our thunderstorms are back in this area right here, and those are going to be moving overnight towards the deeper moisture. So this will be a good storm night for Wichita, Dodge City, and possibly parts of northern Oklahoma here. So we'll go ahead and move into the forecast here and see what's going to happen. And I think we'll use the surface dew point to figure out the forecast. All right, let's see here. A quick look at the chat. Ryan mentions in Florida the early morning coastal showers there. Bring up the humidity and heat index during the day. And the humidity hovers and goes nowhere, so very high heat index is there this time of year, and I guess especially today. Let me take a quick look in Florida and see what's going on. Yeah, 74, 75. Actually, yeah, dew points all the way up to 78 around Vero Beach in Melbourne. That's way up there. But yeah, pretty high here in Texas too. I'm seeing 77 there at Lufkin. So I've got the AC off right now to keep off the background noise, and I can already feel the temperature coming up in here. Okay, 75 in Denver for Mike Estwick there. And Justin Polium, Says lots of rain and storms there all day. Lloyd McCarter, storms split there coming across the mountains to the west. Justin downloaded Digital Atmosphere and asking about the new version, when it's going to be released. I don't have a release date for that. I'm just kind of working on it as I get time. And hopefully I'll have a good chunk of time this weekend to get that up and running. Burl H. liked the overshooting top explanation. Sue M. says beautiful day there in Indiana. Ryan watching the drone feeds from the wildfires out in the west. And Ryan mentioning that the storms in Florida blew up earlier and dissipated a few hours ago. So I guess we're seeing a lot of the anvil remnants. And couple comments about the broadcast situation. Justin says 4 to 5 nights a week would be good. Don't kill yourself putting these out for us. Yeah, I'll try not to. But what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to stay consistent because that's, you know, when you're growing a channel like this, you want to keep on a pretty consistent schedule. And Brett Dean says please like and subscribe. And yeah, I do appreciate that. All right, let's head into the forecast here, and I think I've got this ready to go. And I've got dew point up here because the moisture becomes very important this time of year. Conditions aloft, they tend to be relatively homogeneous, so basically your moisture axes are where you're going to find a lot of the precip. Okay, for tonight, cyclogenesis out in the Texas Panhandle. So that'll keep the low-level wind flow kind of backed in the I-35 corridor, kind of like doing like this. So that'll keep the moisture axis in place for that area of storms coming out of Colorado. And then let's see here, for tomorrow, there's the map for tomorrow, and we can see the leading edge of the front very plainly. This has got a lot more definition than I remember seeing on the models last night. So there's the leading edge from St. Louis down to Oklahoma City, down to about La Mesa, Texas. And then we're probably going to have a dry line around the Abilene area down to Junction, kind of like that. Moisture axis from Houston up to Dallas. And I think we'll see thunderstorms once again, this time focusing on Oklahoma and the Red River area. Then for Saturday, looks like we have some sort of boundary in the I-30 area, Dallas, Shreveport. And remember that the GFS is not very good with mesoscale details. So we could find that boundary a little further south, or we could find it a little north, and with it the precip. So we could see precip anywhere in this area here. So there's our front, and that's starting to retreat northward as the broad scale circulation starts pulling that back northward. We can see the appearance of a few 80s dew points around Texarkana there. So some pretty serious moisture there. Okay, then for Sunday night, looks like that warm front is lifted northward, maybe something like that, maybe through Kansas. And then up north, looks like things are pretty quiet there. This looks kind of like a lee side trough. And not much going on in the interior. I think we've just got kind of a heat low. Let's see, would this be a heat low? Yeah, maybe down in Nevada, but I think there probably is mostly a response to the Barrett Clinic system up there in Alberta. So probably pretty warm for the desert southwest, and then maybe some sort of front up there in British Columbia. But pretty quiet elsewhere. High pressure over the southeast U.S., and there's the high out over Georgia. Again, this is on Sunday. Then going into Monday, let's see, some pretty good cyclogenesis there in Kansas. So there's a front right there in the Kansas City area. Looks like the dry line is actually active once again. So I guess we've got probably a little upper air system coming through and helping to generate that surface low. Probably another front up and down the boundary. So I guess we're pulling in a little bit of dynamics here for Monday. This looks to be pretty good for thunderstorms in northern Kansas and southwest Nebraska, right in that area. For Tuesday, we don't see a whole lot of change. Low pressure area there in Kansas, maybe some sort of boundary. This looks to be kind of like an outflow boundary. Probably what we had is an MCS move eastward and dissipate, and this is the boundary that got laid down. Still bringing up moisture from the Gulf, but a little bit of a weakness here in the Texarkana area. Okay, then going into Wednesday, looks like more boundaries through Oklahoma and Texas, or Oklahoma and Kansas, into the Texas Panhandle. So rain chances will continue. For Thursday, looks like that boundary is in the Texas-Oklahoma area. So rain chances will continue. And this little area of drier air, to me that indicates that there's been convection going on somewhere in Texas. Maybe some sort of MCS somewhere within Texas or off the coast. So that's been eating up the moisture a little bit. For Friday, we start developing this low pressure area in Texas. I think that's starting to become more of a frontal system. So you see that right there, a little bit of a frontal system coming together, and behind it, northeasterly flow. That's not bringing down much dry air. You can see lots of 60s and 70s across the Midwest. However, we will have some pretty good convergence in this area and probably some pretty good rain chances. So again, this is for Friday the 7th. Then for Saturday the 8th, low pressure system in Texas. Looks like high rain chances again. Further out in the Midwest, we've got high pressure out over Indiana. So the general prevailing flow is looking like that. Cool northeasterly flow on the in the northeast U.S. And out in the southeast U.S., we're kind of dominated by the Bermuda high. And then in Texas, we're on the other side of that Midwest high pressure area, bringing up the moisture. And then we've got that boundary there in Texas kind of serving as a focus there for precipitation. Okay, so we're starting to get pretty far out there. This is Sunday next weekend, the 9th. Looks like a couple boundaries there. Very complex system. But when we're getting this far out, this is about 9 to 10 days in the future. You know, you're talking about 9 to 10 days of mesoscale systems. Probably a lot of MCSs moving through the central U.S. especially. And it's hard enough to forecast those boundaries 48 hours out, let alone 250 hours out. So we can't say for sure that we're going to have like a boundary just like that on the 10th. But it does look like there is going to be a pretty active pattern anywhere from Texas up to the central U.S. So it looks like above average precipitation for this area over the next week or week and a half. We're definitely bringing up the moisture. So, and then the other part of the picture is the 200 millibar pattern. And this is mostly dominated by the long wave, the long wave patterns. And one thing that we have not seen is ridging building in. See, in fact, we've even got troughing here in the central U.S. So over the next week or two, little shortwave ridge and then more troughing. And this is just not conducive to bringing in that summer heat in Texas that we usually see this time of year. The upper level ridge well to the south in Mexico. We're just bringing in troughs one after the other. Here comes another trough into Texas, right there, closing off into a closed low there on the 4th and 5th. So I guess we're actually looking at kind of a wet pattern on the 4th of July, maybe for Oklahoma, Kansas, and Nebraska. Most of that, however, will be during the overnight hours. Now I can see the long wave ridge building in. See the large scale picture here. So yeah, we are starting to build in a little bit of ridging, but we've still got that little low there to contend with. And then it looks like another trough kind of builds in. So these things keep breaking down this ridge that is trying to form. The only place where we're really getting that ridge building in is in the west, in the Rockies, where they've got that drought going on. And there's the upper level high. This is on the 7th, or actually on the 6th, on Thursday next week. So big upper level high across Utah and Wyoming, and that'll keep things on the warm side and things pretty well shut down. But Texas will be getting that precip. So continued troughing by the weekend of the 8th and 9th, and ridging out to the west, kind of staying anchored out there over the Great Basin region. And it does look like plenty of chances for precip in the Great Lakes area and Indiana, the northeast U.S., Illinois, Ohio. And you've probably seen all these troughs coming in. I'll just run this one more time, and you can check that out. Very active jet stream across that region here. So by the 1st and 2nd, one segment of the jet comes through, a little bit of ridging, and then we're back to jet stream energy running through that area, troughs. So probably a lot of chances for precip there during the 1st and 2nd week of July. And then we get to the very end, and it looks like maybe a little bit of ridging starting to try to move to the east into Texas, but the model is still going for a little bit of upper level troughing over Texas, even by the 15th. So looks like it's going to be a while before we get into the hundreds in our part of Texas here. Okay, let's see, one last look at the chat. In fact, I'll just pull up the radar while we're looking at that. And I think I'm going to look at the Dodge City radar. Let's do that. Got a few severe warnings there for western Kansas. Okay. Taking a look at the chat here. Let's see here. Derek Seymour says, great job as always, Tim. I appreciate that. Carl Burkhoff made it in. Brett Dean says, half to the jet. Stay weather savvy. Great work tonight. Thank you very much. And Ryan says, absolutely. Thomas says, did I miss anything? Justin says, you ought to watch from the beginning. Too much to miss. And I never really did quite go into that severe weather fundamentals that I was talking about yesterday. I was going to try to start with some of the basics and show you kind of the nuts and bolts of forecasting using kind of like textbook basics. And I think we'll probably try to do that tomorrow if there are no problems. Thomas Copeland asked, what was the Prairie Berg tornado rated? And Carl says he heard about it being F2. Ryan says he's not sure if it's posted yet. ADW says the F2, 120 mile an hour winds. Justin says, don't a lot of the newer aircraft have heat exchangers that use engine oil to heat the fuel? And Ryan says, yes, they do. Exchangers, lines that run through the fuel tanks. Okay. Okay, scrolling past the aircraft discussion here very quickly. Let's see, Governor Cheeseburger, that's a new name. Welcome to the webcast. He says the Gulf in the east gives moisture and the mountains in the west dry things out. Yeah, that's pretty much how it works. Eddie W. talking about the tornado says they should have the survey done tomorrow with the path and a few other surveys. They're in the middle of an office move. Radar luckily came back on shortly before the storms they were working on out of Des Moines. And Sue M. says, thanks, Tim. Kevin McKinney, 82 days to the start of fall. Michael O. hates the heat, and I'm with you on that one for sure. I am counting down the days here till late October. I put in a really good AC here, so I think I'm pretty much set for the rest of this summer. I had it down to 75 degrees here when I woke up this morning, so staying nice and cool here. All right, one last look at the storms there in Colorado and Kansas. We know that the front is somewhere down in this area, so these are a little bit elevated, but there's plenty of moisture north of that boundary, so that's not really that big of a deal. So we got one good hailstorm there in Lamar about to cross over 287. And I think they've got a wind farm right in this area here. And I wonder what they do with those wind farms when they've got storms going through them. I think there's only a certain amount of wind those things can take. But yeah, look at this hail here. We're getting like 68 dBZs. That is going to be definitely in the golf ball size. Yeah, they're going for golf ball here. 70 mile an hour wind gusts. And let's take a look at the storm structure here real quick. So we're looking at the area just south of Lamar, Colorado. Seeing a bit of overhang. That's kind of the storm structure right there. The tops are not all that high. And there's the hail right there. There's the storm top right there, 42,000. Take a quick sample through that. Yep, tops up to about 45, 50,000. Pretty good little storm. And further to the east, another hailstorm there near Johnson. And they're tracking to the southeast. And the reason I've been talking about the high-resolution rapid refresh, well, the reason I've been talking about MCSs is because of the high-resolution rapid refresh model. They are aggregating these into an MCS. And let me see if I can show you that real quickly. I'm going to switch over to a mesoscale model. I'm going to switch over to the NAM here. Let me center this on the central U.S. Okay, so NAM, bringing that MCS through the Wichita area later tonight around 2 or 3 in the morning. You can kind of see the meso high back behind it right there, driving that outflow to the southeast and storms generating along that cold pool. Then by 12Z, moving towards the Springfield area. And remember, the moisture axis right up I-35, so as it goes through Wichita, it's going to be tapping that moisture. And then we see it by 10 in the morning, moving through the Ozarks, and then dying out in the boot heel of Missouri there. And let's check out tomorrow while we're at it. Okay, 21Z, we're getting towards peak heating. We can see that the front itself, probably a front outflow hybrid moving south, kind of like this. So we're seeing development along that boundary right there. So a little bit further south. And then that forms up into an MCS by evening. Probably got a little bit of a low-level jet feeding these storms. And that will affect Little Rock, Fort Smith, and maybe even as far west as Oklahoma City overnight. And then those storms will move down towards the Red River, and then they'll die off. So they're pretty much gone there by 21Z. So the next question is, where's the boundary the next day? This is the reason you can't really use the GFS to do this kind of long-range forecasting very much. It'll get some of the details pretty well in place, but there's a lot of uncertainty because everything is so mesoscale driven this time of year. So here's the boundary right there for Saturday afternoon. And we don't see any development along that for some reason, maybe capping or something. There is some sort of wave coming out of Colorado for Saturday night, and that forms an MCS, but that stays mostly in the Oklahoma City area. So I don't know about the prospects of things south of Dallas. I guess we're just going to have to wait and see. And we'll check it out tomorrow night and see how things look for then. Okay, and that's probably about it for me. Just one last look at chat here. Kevin says 82 days until the start of fall. The heat has hit things hard in Florida. And Michael O says mesoscale weather, the only reason summer is interesting, at least here in the Mid-South. Okay, that's probably about all I got for tonight. Appreciate you all watching, and we'll try to cover some of those forecasting basics tomorrow. Let's see, what am I playing here? Sorry, I couldn't hear what was playing, so I just wanted to make sure we were running the correct music. Anyway, that's all I got for tonight. I appreciate you watching, and hopefully we'll see you all tomorrow night. Take care.